Nehemiah 9:15 through 21. In their hunger you gave them bread from heaven, and in their thirst you brought them water from the rock. You told them to go and take possession of the land you had sworn with your uplifted hands to give them. But our ancestors became arrogant and stiff-necked, and they did not obey your commands. They refused to listen and failed to remember the miracles you performed among them. They became stiff-necked and in their rebellion appointed a leader in order to return to their slavery. But you are a forgiving God, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love. Therefore you did not desert them, even when they cast for themselves an image of a calf and said, "This is your God who brought you up out of Egypt," or when they committed awful blasphemies. Because of your great compassion, you did not abandon them in the wilderness. By day the pillar of cloud did not fail to guide them on their path, nor the pillar of fire by night to shine on the way they were to take. You gave your good spirit to instruct them. You did not withhold your manna from their mouths. You gave them water for their thirst. For 40 years you sustained them in the wilderness. They lacked nothing. Their clothes did not wear out, nor did their feet become swollen.
Moses led God's people away from the Red Sea, and they came to the wilderness. They could not find good water to drink, and they complained to Moses. God said, "If you obey me and do what is right and keep my commands, I will not punish you like I punished the Egyptians. I am the Lord who heals you."
The Israelites came to a place called Elim, where they found plenty of food and water. They camped there. The Israelites left Elim and journeyed into the wilderness. They were hungry. They complained to Moses, "We wish we had died in Egypt. At least there was food to eat," they said. "You brought us out here to starve to death." But Moses had not brought them out there to die. God knew what he was doing.
God said, "I have heard the complaints of the Israelites. Tell them, in the evening you will eat meat, and in the morning you will eat bread until you are full. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." So at evening, quail came into the camp. In the morning, fine flakes like frost were on the ground. "What is it?" the Israelites asked. Moses said, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat."
The Israelites called the bread manna, which means, "What is it?" God gave the people instructions. He told them to collect just enough to eat for the day. If they collected too much, the leftovers went bad. He told them to collect twice as much on the 6th day because the 7th day was the Sabbath, a day to rest. The Israelites did not always follow God's instructions. Sometimes they collected too much manna, and sometimes they tried to collect manna on the Sabbath day.
Moses was angry that the people refused to obey God. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years while they were in the wilderness. The Israelites moved about the wilderness as the Lord told them to do. One day, they came to a camp with no water. "Give us something to drink," they told Moses. "Why are you complaining to me?" Moses asked. "You brought us out here to die," the Israelites said. They forgot that the Lord had a plan for them. "Lord, what should I do?" Moses cried out. God showed Moses a rock and instructed him to hit it with his staff. Water came out of it and the people drank. It was a sign that the Lord was with them.
In the New Testament, Jesus said that he is the bread of life. God provided manna from heaven for his people's physical hunger, and later he provided his son, Jesus, for our spiritual hunger. The Israelites needed bread to live for a little while, but whoever has Jesus will live forever.
Well, hopefully you enjoyed that video we just got to watch that told the story of Exodus 16, telling the story of the Israelites. And I don't have to go over that because you just got to see that in a much better way than I could tell it. But what I do want to emphasize is they came to the wilderness because God freed the Israelites from slavery. They were under slavery in Egypt, and God delivered them. And he delivered them through plagues. He delivered them through the Red Sea, through parting the Red Sea, and he brought them to the wilderness. So God had done amazing things in the Israelites' lives. But in this story, we see the Israelites are in the wilderness. They're questioning every day, where are our needs going to be met? They're questioning. They know that they're on a path to the promised land. They know that God has done amazing things, but they're living in a moment where they're questioning, did God just drop the ball? Did God just forget that we have to eat and we have to drink too? And they begin questioning God. And I think the tie-in to our situation is pretty obvious, but I want to share with you for a second. Is there a time, and maybe that time is right now, but is there a time where you have felt this questioning of God? God, why did you bring me here? God, why are my needs not being met? I want to share with you a story from my life in a time where this hit me in a big way. And it was 2 years ago, and I had gotten the call that my grandpa had passed away. And it was a devastating call, and one of the things that my grandpa had asked was, Brandon, will you, but before he had passed, he had asked, will you serve, or will you speak at my funeral? And this was amazing to me, and it was just such a whirlwind of emotions. And I'm living in San Antonio, and I had to head back to Oklahoma. And so I went on this journey. The day after, the next day would be the day that this funeral took place. And I'm heading home, and I'm trying to get my mind right. And as I'm driving, a car pulls over, and I end up rolling right over this tire in the middle of the road. And come to find out, that tire ripped the undercarriage of my car almost completely out of my car. And the undercarriage of my car is hanging on by one pole as I pull off the highway into an auto shop. And I walk into this auto shop at 1 o'clock on whatever day this was, the day before the funeral. And I just start freaking out, and I start calling to get a car for the next day. I'm just trying to get to my grandpa's funeral the next day. And I spend the next 4 hours on the phone being bounced around to different car rental places, trying to work it out. I'm just trying to get to my grandpa's house and to my grandpa's funeral. And finally at 5 o'clock, I get the call that says, it's 5 o'clock, we're closed. We can get you a car, but at the earliest tomorrow. And I lost it. I'm on the phone with this random car guy, bawling my eyes out, going, I'm just trying to get to my grandpa's funeral, please. And he said, sir, there's nothing that I can do. And the phone clicks and it hangs up. And I'm literally standing on the side of the highway, and I just break down. My knees get weak, and I just break down. And I remember just thinking and kind of praying out, God, why would you bring me here? God, why? I don't deserve this. God, why? And I call my mom. I can't even speak. And a couple minutes later, I get a call from the car rental company again, and a guy goes, I heard your story, man, and I'm going to be there and get you. And it was this moment where I just completely turned my back on God at 180 because I thought he turned his back on me. But it turned out that God hadn't abandoned me like I had felt. I didn't know why God had brought me there. I didn't know why God didn't meet my need, why God hadn't brought me the car that I needed in that moment. And I doubted him. And what I realized is that God was with me all along. And even when I couldn't see it, even when I doubted him, God was with me all along. And the moral of that story is not how bad Brandon needed a car, but it exposed to me how much more faith I was called to have in God, and how much more I needed to rely on God in my life. And I can't help but identify that with the Israelites here, of them going, God, you saved us from slavery, but you can't give us food? God, you can't bring me a car right now? Well, what the video alluded to at the end was the words from Jesus in John chapter 6. Jesus serves 5,000 people food out of nothing, out of just a few pieces of bread, a few pieces of fish. And he gains this big following of people following him, and he turns to them in John chapter 6 and he says, you're following me you're following me for the sake of food, for the sake of drink. But what he says, I didn't come here for that. Jesus says in the first time he says it is in verse 35. He says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. And it's really easy for us to associate that with our physical needs, like the story of my car. But that's not what Jesus was talking about, and that's not what Jesus was promising. Because if we jump forward to verse 47, Jesus says this, truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread that comes from heaven, so that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. Jesus was the bread of life, and he was talking about a bread that would not spoil. Jesus was talking about a bread that would not nourish just our physical needs, but a bread that would nourish us for the rest of our lives. And that's the promise that he made, and that's why he came. And so in the midst of this quarantine, I think it's really easy to identify with the Israelites. We're in a time, maybe we're questioning, God, why'd you bring us here? God, where's this promised land? Where's this promised normalcy? But God's saying, I sent my son. God's saying, I am offering you the bread of life to whoever chooses to believe in me. Not like me in my story where I just completely turned my back on God and thought God had abandoned me. But God shows us that he sent his son to be the bread of life, that he's going to take care of us, whether it's in ways that make sense to us or whether it's ways that don't. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. We've been in quarantine for not even 2 months yet. And what I hope that this time brings is not just all the doubts and all the anger towards God, but instead brings out a type of faith and a type of reliance on him as the bread of our life that we've never had before. And so this week I want to challenge you. Are you consuming of the bread of life? Are you turning to God for the bread of life, or are we just focused on our needs and our wants right now in the middle of this quarantine? Because just like God had never left the Israelites up until the wilderness, he hasn't left you either. And I hope that is something that can impact you and give you hope during this quarantine time. Thank you so much for being a part of this.